You're listening to the BBM Global Network with 25 years in broadcast audio and video production. Our passionate team creates content and marketing for the world of Internet Talk Radio. If you've got a passion, come join us at bbmglobalnetwork.com. The BBM Global Network. Your voice is now heard.
Do you find you're always on the go but never seem to get anywhere? Welcome to EFT for Spiritual Fitness with your host, Cathryn Taylor. Best-selling author Cathryn Taylor will tap your way from energetic overload to a relaxing state of spiritual fitness. So now, please welcome the mother of inner child work and the host of EFT for Spiritual Fitness, Cathryn Taylor.
Greetings. Again, I'm Cathryn Taylor, broadcasting live from the Twin Cities in Minnesota on Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And as you just heard, this is EFT for Spiritual Fitness. So what is spiritual fitness? Well, simply put, it's just establishing habits that enable you to feel fulfilled and harmonious body, mind, heart, and soul. It's really being open to all sorts of inspirations and really allowing yourself to be involved in the never-ending evolution of what I call your future self. And spiritual fitness, or another word for it is spiritual recovery, is really the antidote to what has become one of the major addictions on the planet today, and that is the addiction to stress. Part of what we're going to talk about today is addiction and recovery. And in recent research, it is suggested that we have actually become a planet suffering from what's being called global post-traumatic stress disorder. Now just think of that. As a planet, we are overamped, overinformed, overstimulated, and we need to find ways to release. That's one of the reasons I'm such an advocate of the energy therapies, of EFT, and I've recently been certified in the new modality called tension and trauma releasing exercises. And in future broadcasts, you're going to hear a lot more about how I incorporate EFT, which is simply a self-administered form of acupressure that just neutralizes excessive emotions, and TRE, which is a beautiful modality that through a series of 7 exercises allows your body to build a charge that ultimately engages in what's called the neurogenic tremor. Now, if you've ever been in a stressful or traumatic situation, you might have recognized that in response to that, your body shook. But often as adults, we cut that down. Well, what TRE does is it gives us a way to allow the body to complete that contraction that gets locked into the muscular structures. Every time we feel the stress response, we go into the fight or flight response, and we can't leave and we can't fight back. What do? We freeze. And then that gets locked in our bodies as stress. And that's part of what's happening to us as a planet, is we're getting overstressed. In fact, we're going into what's called cognitive gridlock. The input that we're experiencing is outweighing our brain's ability to process it. So how are we resolving it? Most people don't find EFT or TRE. Most people are addictively or compulsively acting out. And that's our topic for today, is addictions and recovery. And to discuss this topic, I've invited a very dear friend and colleague of mine to join in this conversation. And as you'll witness, one of the very important elements of being spiritually fit is really being healthy enough to establish nurturing and vital relationships with yourself and with your creator, and then ultimately with others. And my friendship and professional collaboration with my friend Nancy Kaley, it's a real testament to the vitality that one can bring into the rewards of such a relationship. Recovery is a we program, and it's so important to have those vital relationships and to be able to show up for them. And since the year 2000, Nancy and I have shown up for each other. We've escorted each other through our addictions and our recoveries, through divorces and marriages. We've worked with our inner children together. We've trained for athletic events together. We've worked within the Akashic Records together. And you'll hear about all of these stories of our respective triumphs and disappointments and some of our journeys together. In fact, one particular one that I'm really excited for us to share is a journey in which we were coming back from Chicago and we were working within our Akashic Records, and some real exciting things happened in that discussion. But before I bring Nancy on, I really I want to give you a taste of her professional background because it's very rich. Again, like me, Nancy is a licensed addictions and drug counselor, and she's the director and facilitator of the COR Retreat. This is a food recovery program that teaches a way to live free from obsession with food and the excess weight it causes. In fact, Nancy and I are both alumni of COR. Nancy graduated from COR almost 4 years ago, and since that time has experienced and maintained 100-pound weight loss. She's improved her health. She's developed a neutral relationship with food. She experiences enhanced relationships and a newfound personal joy and empowerment. So later in this broadcast, we will be talking more about that COR program because quality residential treatment centers for food addiction are really hard to find. And we're fortunate in the Twin Cities that we have COR as an option. Now, before beginning her career with COR, Nancy worked as a licensed addictions counselor for over 21 years. Nancy was employed in a variety of settings, including outpatient, residential, and co-occurring programs, which addressed both mental health and chemical dependency issues. She's enjoyed working at different times exclusively with women and men, developing an ability to respond to the experience and unique needs of both. Nancy's proficiencies and passion embrace the 12-step model of recovery, incorporating understanding about the physical, emotional, and spiritual aspects of self, all of which we talk about on all these broadcasts. And she does that while working to heal, grow, and build support with others who are experiencing the same challenges and success. So without further ado, I would like to welcome my very dear friend and colleague, Nancy Kaley. So Nancy, are you there?
I am. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Well, thank you for joining me. This is such a conversation of passion for both of us. And so would you be willing to just start by sharing a little bit about your journey through your many addictions and the progression of your own recovery, which ultimately really led you to the COR Retreat?
Yes, I feel like the COR Retreat is where it's just a journey. You referenced future self earlier in your introduction, and COR Retreat is definitely at this point in my journey, a future self from a long history, a lifetime of addictions, I believe, starting as a child with food and sugar. Food and sugar were definitely my first addiction. I have no conscious memory of having a relationship with food that didn't include a strange and passionate attachment to sugar. And so I spent my childhood kind of, I guess, enjoying that and being ashamed about that at the same time. It's a very complex relationship addiction. And so I was very passionate about food. I loved to bake. I taught myself to bake at an early age and progressed through life, certainly carried extra weight with that. I would look back and I would say in 6th grade, I was the chubbiest girl in the class. And of course, that comes with shame and embarrassment and confusion about why I'm living this way in this body and I don't look like other girls. Mm-hmm. And then in my teenage years, I would say that addiction somewhat moved over into alcohol and other chemicals. I was lucky enough to find recovery from alcohol and other chemicals at a young age, at age 21, from going through several different treatment programs here in Minnesota, and then finding the wonderful program of Alcoholics Anonymous, where I settled in. I really did settle into AA and the 12 steps and worked those actively around my addiction and sobriety. I then went on to become a licensed alcohol and drug counselor and felt very good about the work I did with that, which is where I met you in the year 2000. Mm-hmm. When you came on at the agency where I was working. And I'll never forget meeting you. I found out that you were an expert, I guess, with workshops, and you had written the Inner Child Workbook and done a grief workshop. And I remember asking you if you had a workshop for staying organized. It was one of my first, I guess, one of the first times that we bantered is I recognized I needed your help with something, right? Mm-hmm. And that was to stay organized, because you're such a helper, Cathryn. I know in all the years I've known you, you're just such a helper, and I guess an organizer. You have a focus and an intention about things, and you set them and you achieve them. So at the time when we first met, I also remember watching you and being in awe about how healthy you were, about how spiritual you were, certainly about how much spiritual practice you engaged in, and also about how physically aware of your body and the food that you put into it you were. And you were actually the first person in my life that really, in a very matter-of-fact and loving way, just let me know what you saw sugar doing to me. So that's one of my first memories, too, of our relationship, is your honest, friendly, I guess, friend-based input into, I watch what sugar does to you, and I think it's dangerous for you. It would be many years and workshops and work with you and friendship, and many years later before I was finally able to surrender it. But it was all, I guess, all on my travels to my future self.
Right.
And I like you had mentioned, in 2014 is when I found COR Retreat, and have since that time, since November 14th of 2014, I've surrendered all sugar and flours and processed sugars of any kind, artificial sweeteners, and just found true freedom finally from food addiction.
Well, and that was about 10 years after you came into, well, first of all, one of the things you really supported me in was in 2003 when I trained for my first marathon. And remember, you were at the end of Grandma's Marathon, and I had organized this. Talk about organizing. I'd had, the 10 children in my life. They were all waiting at that last mile, and you were lining them up so they could run me in and all of that. And I remember you were one of my main supporters. And then after that is when I developed what was then called the Joy Keepers program, but has now become the Soul Steps program. And I can't believe, Nance, that was in 2004 that we did that. And, you were one of the first groups. I did like 4 or 5 groups, but you were one of the first groups that went through that 9-month program. What do you remember about that, the Joy Keepers program, and how it impacted you in terms of your journey?
Oh my goodness. The Joy Keepers program was instrumental in my journey to where I am now. And at the time, relevant and important. And I did it with a close friend of mine. We paired up in the Joy Keepers format. You had a partner who you did daily check-ins with. And it was a friend of mine that I've known. And I remember at the time, just to share a little bit about her story, not too much, but we started in January. And I know part of the Joy Keepers program was to do an athletic event, some sort of event that we could emerge as that adolescent, kind of the gym class kid who wanted to do a physical event. And so for Deb, that was in January when she started. She could not run a mile. And so she started on a protocol. And in June, I watched her run the Grandma's Half Marathon, which is, you had run the Grandma's Full Marathon in 2003. And so then in 2004, I watched my friend Deb complete the half marathon. And for myself, my event was a 5K that you ran with me. And
I remember.
So that was one of the first times. I mean, that was for me one of the times where I could start to understand and really step into and heal parts of myself from the past, but also set goals and find a physical part of myself, a spiritual, physical exercise part of myself that you taught me through that program. I also have a very clear memory of a future self that we did in a meditation, who I got to admit, I got to be honest, sometimes when I do a meditation and I find an image or something, I doubt it. I tend to wonder, is that really the truth? And here she is. Here I am.
Yeah. Okay, well, we have to take a short break, but when we come back, I really want to talk more about that evolution. So, again, I'm Cathryn Taylor, and this is EFT for Spiritual Fitness. We're broadcasting live on BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio, and we'll be right back to talk more about food addictions and spiritual recovery.
Are you looking for employment and live in Los Angeles, Orange, Riverside, and San Bernardino counties? Jobs Annex is the place for you. Are you an employer looking to fill a position or quite a few positions in Los Angeles, Orange, Riverside, and San Bernardino counties? Jobs Annex is for you. Employers, JobsAnnex.com is your resource for career-minded people. JobsAnnex.com is the convenient place for job seekers and employers to hook up and move forward. Jobs Annex has been serving Los Angeles, Orange, Riverside, and San Bernardino counties for over 14 years. Jobs Annex is a former employment search firm. We've evaluated many thousands of resumes, and we understand what employers want and what job applicants need to be successful in their interviews. At Jobs Annex, we provide you with the tools to tell your story for free. Our resources at JobsAnnex.com will help each applicant construct an award-winning resume, an eye-catching cover letter, and key interview questions to ask in various types of interviews. Best of all, it's free. JobsAnnex.com. That's JobsAnnex.com.
There are artists, and then there's Alice Asmar. This award-winning artist has spent her entire life devoted to her artistic pursuits and has had a lifelong fascination with American Indians of the southwestern United States. Her book, Dance to the Great Spirit, showcases her drawings and paintings inspired by sacred rituals of the Pueblo Indians, and 4 of her lithographs are in permanent collection at the National Museum of American History and the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. She is one of 4 artists in the United States to win a Woolley Fellowship for study in Paris at l'École des Beaux-Arts and has been featured in numerous publications. She's exhibited at the world's most prestigious museums and galleries and recently won a 20-year service award from the Burbank City Council and the inaugural art competition of the Foundation of the United States in Paris.
Visit www.asmarart.com, www.aliceasmarinternational.com, and email Alice at aliceasmar@aol.com.
Welcome back to EFT for Spiritual Fitness, broadcasting live on BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. And again, I'm your host, Cathryn Taylor, and today I'm with my friend and colleague, Nancy Kaley, the director and facilitator of the COR Retreat, a food recovery program that teaches a way to live free from obsession with food and the excess weight it causes. And before the break, we were just beginning to talk about kind of the evolution of the addictions, and Nancy had shared a lot about her story. We talked a little bit about the Soul Steps, or the Joy Keepers program, as it was known then, that she did in 2004, and how ultimately in 2014 she ended up as a participant at the COR Retreat. So, Nancy, before we jump into the story about COR, let's talk a little bit about our journey to New York, because that was a high point for both of us. That was when I was on that trajectory of, I really wanted to complete 4 marathons, 1 in each corner of the United States. So you participated in Grandma's, which was the North, and I think, then the next one was I went to San Francisco and did the West. And then in that November, you came to New York with me as I did my New York marathon. And that was a high point for you too. So you want to continue your story and talk about what New York held for you?
Oh my goodness. What New York held for me was quitting smoking. So I had been a smoker and maintained that in my recovery from alcoholism and pretty stubborn about it. And when I was making plans with you to go to New York, we were going to travel with a running club. I had a spiritual willingness, and I knew it was truly a spiritual moment where I knew if I was going to travel with you and be supportive, that I needed to quit smoking on that trip. And I literally put a cigarette out in my kitchen, grabbed my suitcase, and left for the airport, and haven't had a cigarette since. So that was a significant trip for me. As I joined you in you running the marathon and enjoyed New York City in the fall, which was beautiful, it was that was where God allowed me to surrender smoking. So very significant.
Oh, boy, do I remember that trip. I was so sore afterwards, and I remember the ending. I mean, that was not a trip that I broke any records, because I never broke records running marathons anyway. I ran them for the fun of it, so I was kind of the 5 to 6 hour person. But in that one, I had been really congested, and so I just didn't have any lung power. But I remember the last kind of quarter of a mile, I saw you in a distance, and I had that New York sweatshirt on, and I pulled it off and I threw it to you as I went through the finish line. It was great.
Yes.
It was a great moment. All of those moments.
I still have the sweatshirt. I wear it.
Well, and then, so that was 2005, right? And then...
It was November 2005.
Right. And then that's kind of when, I think it was around that time that I left treatment. I left the treatment center that we were working at. And that's when I started writing all these books. I wrote Soul Steps at that point in time. And then I really started offering that format for people. And it really is a good program. It was inspired by Jennifer and I. Jennifer actually was on my show last week working with the Akshic Records. And she and I took a whole year to train for that, for grandmas. And every week we would get together and we'd do a training run, and we'd open the records and we did our inner child work, and we just did our spiritual work. And I remember 2 weeks before grandmas, we went up to Duluth, Minnesota, where grandma's marathon is held. And we went to the start line, and we did this whole ceremony of just bringing the angels in to be there for all of the runners. It was just really cool. And then you were at the end of that. And then I went on to run the San Francisco and the New York one, and then that February. So I think within 18 months, I ran the 4 marathons. And the last one I ran was in the South, and it was New Orleans. And it was 6 months after Katrina. And it was the very first event in New Orleans after that. And we were at, that big center. And I remember we were running through, we did like 26.2 miles, and we ran through some of the districts that had been hit. And it took me, I think, 2 months to recover from that, because it was just such an emotional experience. So running was really a vital part of my life. And Soul Steps kind of gave birth to you becoming an athlete, right?
Yes, it did. Yes, it absolutely did. I didn't ever think that I would show up and complete a 5K. And that's what I did as a result of that program. And that, I guess what I've learned is that once you know something, or once you learn something about yourself, you can't unlearn it. And so even though I would imagine my road, obviously, when we're going to talk about food addiction and more desperation and a lot of weight gain for me, a lot of excess weight with that, even though that was to come after, there was always a part of me that knows where that I've accomplished that and been able to achieve that. And so I think for me, it was because I went on after that even to do a lot of weight training and a lot of stuff with my physical health, just not an ability to get the food and sugar piece, which was the last thing for me to fall into place. But that definitely sealed the deal for me in terms of, you have an athlete inside of you. You may have been a chubby kid. You may have struggled your whole life with food, but you do have an athlete inside of you.
That you held on to. And I remember you got a hold of your ideal weight at that point in time, and we did a lot of meditations and images of that future self. That's a vital part of the Soul Steps Joy Keepers program. Well, so then let's talk a little bit, because 2014 was a pretty big year for both of us for real different reasons. So why don't you kind of tell your story that ended up in you getting to COR, and then I'll tell my story, because they're different stories, but you actually got there before I did.
I did. I actually got to COR. I had been in and out of the rooms of Overeaters Anonymous for years, years in and out, and I was never able to really surrender the foods that were really the most dangerous for me. My trigger foods. I was never able to surrender all the different forms of sugar, and I found the COR Retreat. And I pretty reluctantly, I'm going to say, signed up, but I knew that I needed help. So it was one of those times in life where you know that you need to maybe ask for and accept help, and you do it whether you want to or not. It's the willingness that shows up, and the ability to allow others into your process. And so that's what COR Retreat did for me. And I had a very significant surrender moment the first evening of COR, where I was going to go through a food line and I was going to eat my first abstinent, we call it abstinent meal, that had no sugars or flour and in measured portions. And I truly in that line was able to, in that food line with all my anxiety and nervousness and stress, was able to surrender and say, you're going to do, this is being shown to you and you're going to surrender to that. And so that started for me what has now been an almost 4-year journey, and now being blessed and grateful to step into the facilitation role of that group after years of facilitating alcohol and drug treatment groups. It's like my life has gone, my future self is here now, and this is the gift that I get to work with, is this freedom from this food addiction and obsession. So that for me was where I found COR in 2014 and have stayed connected and present and relevant in recovery from that ever since then.
What a triumph. And I remember then in 2014, you progressively lost weight, and then we decided again to train for the Twin Cities 10-miler. And we were pretty involved in the training, and I was up to, I think it was a 10-miler, but I had run a 13-mile one, and my last 13-mile run that I did actually was June 21st of 2014. We were already registered for the race, and we were in Chicago, my husband and I were, and I went to this reserve to run it, and my knee gave out. Now, my knee in 1975, I'd had a really severe car accident where I had shattered my right kneecap, and for like 39 years, my knees had carried me because I'd been a runner all my life. And so that summer was just really heartbreaking for me. I always said, I don't know what I'll do if I ever don't have the ability to run. And so what happened for me is that I remember one of the things I talked about at my 70th gathering that you were there for was that moment when Jennifer came out to run the 10 miler, and you and your friend were at the start line, and I joined you there. But by that time, I knew I couldn't run anymore. And one of the saddest moments of my life was watching you guys take off. And at that time, I was lost. It's like I had used running as a way to manage my emotions and certainly keep me biochemically balanced. And that next year, I went through, I think, a worse depression than even I went through at losing my mother and my father. It was just horrendous. I felt betrayed. You know what I really lost was I had used running to stay connected to my higher self. And I didn't know how to do it. And I remember, that went on for like 6 months. And I was just kind of lost. And I remember us talking then about COR. And I talked to Kendra, a friend of ours who had done it. And I remember talking to you. And by that time, my food addiction had kind of returned because I didn't have any way to manage it. And so I was just excessively eating. I never had a real problem with weight, but I could just see that I was using food to manage, and that the biochemical piece, which is such an important part of food addictions, had really gotten out of hand. And I needed help. And so I went to COR, and I remember I went to COR May 13th, and I went to just get myself into a spiritual environment, because what I love about the COR program is you work with the first 3 steps. And so when everybody else was really writing letters to say goodbye to, the food of their choice and stuff like that, the more significant letter I wrote was the goodbye to the runner within me and who she was. And I reestablished my connection with my higher self during COR. And I went on, I think, the next month to do Encore, which is a continuation where, which steps do you do in Encore, Nancy? Do you do
in
all
Encore, we work
9?
We do 4 through 9 specifically, and then we talk about 10, we address 10 through 12. So it's 4 through 12.
Right. Yeah, that's what I thought. So that kind of completed it. And that just inspired me to get involved in the 12 steps in a way that I never had, which then leads us to our infamous journey to Chicago. So I'll set the stage for that. Well, I guess I'll have to set the stage when we come back because we have to take another little break. So again, I'm Cathryn Taylor, and you're listening to EFT for Spiritual Fitness. We're broadcasting live on BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. And stay tuned because we'll be right back and we'll talk further about our infamous journey to Chicago and back.
The earliest human societies worshipped a female goddess. Little is known about this time because we did not always have a written recorded history. It was around 3100 BC when the Sumerians invented the first written language, and everything that preceded this time is prehistory. The prehistorical record includes all of women's unwritten history from 30,000 BC to the time that men began achieving political power around 3000 BC. Male feminist artist Kimberly Berg maintains a strong position in educating and inspiring both men and women through his devotional art to the goddess in all women. Studying their history is paramount to understanding who women were and who they would become later living in a patriarchal society. To learn more about this important time in our history, go to www.isisrising.net. Animal lover, author, artist, and public speaker, Patricia Daly-Lipe is a Renaissance woman in her own right. A lover of animals from a young age, Patricia lives on a farm in Virginia and has rescued neglected thoroughbred horses, keeping them or finding them safe havens. She is also a published author, and her books document real-life experiences that she shares in her passionate stories, taking the reader around the world in a colorful kaleidoscope of life. An accomplished artist, Patricia Daly-Lipe's oil paintings feature animals, portraits, stills, nature, and abstract, and she allows the brush to paint the image in an organic, natural way. A public speaker, Patricia is motivated to continually wonder about life and advocates for all of us to do the same and document our own unique history. To learn more about Patricia Daly-Lipe, visit www.literarylady.com and www.patricialipe.com or email her at pdlipe@gmail.com.
Welcome back to EFT for Spiritual Fitness, and we're broadcasting live on BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. And again, I'm your host, Cathryn Taylor, and if you're just tuning in, I have been talking and having a conversation with my friend and colleague, Nancy Kaley, who is the director and facilitator of COR Retreat. COR Retreat is located in Wayzata, Minnesota. It's a food recovery program that teaches a way to live free from obsession with food and the excess weight it causes. And we've been talking about addictions and recovery and the importance of vital relationships in attaining and sustaining what I refer to as spiritual fitness or spiritual recovery. And right before break, we were just getting to the part of Nancy's and my story together of what is being termed the infamous journey to Chicago. And so to just set that up a little bit, a couple broadcasts ago, I played excerpts from an interview that I did with my dear friend Donna Fox, who is the first person to teach me about the Akashic Records. And actually, as I said in that broadcast, Donna made her transition this last February. And so I felt very blessed that I still had that interview, because whenever I introduce the Akashic Records to any group, I always like to include a conversation with Donna, and now I at least have that as a recording. But Donna had contacted me because they were having their annual Akashic Records conference, and she wanted me to be the keynote speaker in it. And so Donna had come to Minnesota, I think, earlier, and Nancy, you had done her class, so you had already taken the Akashic Records class. And so Nancy and I decided to go down together. It was a 2-day ordeal. And it was kind of big for us because it was the first trip that we were going to be together, and we were going to follow our food plan and be on the road. And I'm kind of a pro of that. And so I felt like I brought my little frying pan that I cooked my filet mignon in. And I was really excited about what I felt was showing Nancy how easy you can take your program on the road. Not that she necessarily needed that, but I kind of self-appointed myself as her teacher in that. So we laughed a lot about that. But
I did need that, Cathryn, and I have to butt in, and I have to tell you that I have since shared and paid forward your tips and helpful ways to be in a hotel room and be able to eat food that's healthy. And so I've shared the picture of the frying pan that you gifted me with that I still use to this day to make eggs in a hotel room. And so I did need it, and it has saved my butt numerous times when traveling.
Well, I remember one of the peak moments where we were, I think, at Love's truck stop. And I had my little canister, and we'd done this little pieces of filet mignon, and we had our salad, and we sat there, and we got our water, and it's like we were so decadent in having filet mignon in the middle of this truck stop. It was like really cute. Mm-hmm. But what was really amazing, for one, it was the last time either one of us saw Donna. But what was really amazing about that trip is we were just enveloped in that Akashic energy. And for those of you who are listening that don't know what the Akashic Records are, they're simply the record of your soul. It's the imprint that your soul makes with every experience it has on the field that's called the Akashic field. And so there's a whole sacred prayer that we were taught that gets us in that vibrational resonance with that field of energy. And so Nancy and I hit the road about 9 o'clock Sunday morning, and we opened our records, and we just really worked within our records the whole time. But somewhere, in the middle of the trip, shortly after Madison, we were talking, and I said, maybe we should see if we could open the records of Bill W. Now, Bill W., for some people that might not know, is the founder of Dr. Bob and Bill W. started the first group of 12 steps. And so he's seen, along with Dr. Bob, as the one that got it started because they came together and kept each other from using with that. And so we were kind of giggly about it, remember? And so I said the prayer. I asked permission, from him. And I said the prayer. And we've got a recording of it somewhere. But pretty soon, Bill W. started coming through. And Nancy, before I give my rendition of it, what do you remember about that conversation with Bill W.?
Well, I specifically remember a sensation when he came in and your response to him. He came in almost chuckling as an old sage, as an ascended master, saying, I've been waiting for someone
I remember that.
to talk to. He had been waiting for someone to talk to. And what I specifically remember is the relevance of what we're doing right now today with any addiction. The fourth layer that you talk about with the stress addiction, and that was addressed in the reading that we had that day, with the relevance that those 12 steps and that energy has with anything we're still struggling with today, and his delight that we were willing to say it can be bigger and broader than just Alcoholics Anonymous. Even though I don't mean any disrespect to Alcoholics Anonymous, it was Bill saying thank you for recognizing how this solution can work with any addiction. And I think so. It's been important for me in all of the things that I've surrendered, and now for you with your work on the stress addiction, which is that next layer, the kind of the last one to go, I think.
Right.
To go, but to the last one to really recognize and work with.
Right. Well, and
once I put even now when I put the food down.
Right. What I've realized is what got birthed for me from that conversation, and then your whole journey kind of can be talked about too, but was I was beginning to see that fourth stage of recovery. And in 1986, I wrote a book called Life Beyond Confusion and Fear. And so in the early days, I had established a 3-stage addiction and recovery program. And the first stage obviously was the intervention, that primary treatment, and, the aftercare treatment that COR does, and that, the programs that we worked in did. And then the second stage is what my area of expertise really is, which is the inner child work. But that came from my studying alcoholism and addiction. And then the third stage, which I call the spiritual pursuit. And so shortly after we had that conversation with Bill W., what came, and in fact, I even think it came in that conversation where I began to see the 4 stages of not only our spiritual pursuit as the third stage, but the multidimensional purpose of our addictions, and looking at it from a multifaceted perspective where I deal with not only the personalities, addictions, and how we deal with it, mind, body, heart, and soul, but opening up the records to see on a soul perspective, what was the soul wanting each individual to confront by even charting the potential to be an addict. Like, what was the spiritual lesson? And I've continued to develop that. That's actually the last book that I'm working on. And it all started on that trip back. And since then, I continued to work with Bill W. and Lois and even Ernie Larson. I've never talked to Dr. Bob, but mostly Bill W. and Lois. Somehow I had a real connection with Lois, and I began to feel on a soul level that I was even back there then. I knew that I wasn't in recovery. I wasn't part of that first 100, but I felt like I was related to Lois and kind of a distant relative. So I felt connected somehow to that. And so in the evolvement of that book, Bill W. and Lois have been very, very instrumental in bringing that together. And as most of my listeners know by now, I talk a lot about how thin the veil is between non-physical and physical worlds. And I'm a firm believer, after my relationship with my mother and my father and even my pets and loved ones that have gone to the other side, that there just really is no separation if we on the human realm are able to vibrate to the point where we can allow ourselves to believe in that contact. So those interactions with Bill W. and Lois were very real to me. But on that day, he also brought through some real relevant information for your next part of the journey, Nance. Can you relay some of that? Because you were just getting ready to start another new job before COR, right?
I was starting another new job, which was a job where I was going to work in a treatment center that was based just solely in the simplicity of the 12 steps and working the 12 steps, which have to do certainly with that first step and then surrender after that and reliance on a higher power and the group support around us. And that in building that support with others, building relationships, repairing relationships through the amends step. And again, every day surrendering and every day living in that vibration of, I can be free of this addiction. I cannot pick up again. And so I was moving into a place, and we actually had a document there that's called Recovery 101, which is the very basics of 12 steps, the simple basics of 12-step recovery, which of course has now led me to the COR program where I'm working, where we spend, when you come a participant in the COR Retreat, we spend the 5 days focusing on how to get this started, the basics and the simplicity of how to get this started. First and foremost, how to put the food down, the specific foods that may trigger us and that are physically dangerous, harmful to us. And then we work on that simplicity of starting. So that was kind of what Bill's, I guess, validation to me is you are in the right work. This is the work that you will be doing, and that this is where I'm supposed to be. And I haven't doubted that. There hasn't been, I don't know that there's been a point in my life, and maybe this is a process, part of getting older too, and working on spiritual stuff for as long as I have with you and with others and with myself, on my own with my guides and my masters. But I've not ever doubted this path again. This has been a true, clear path. And that day, that trip, really solidified that, or really, really set me right on that path and that road.
I remember we both vowed to not tell anybody, because people were going to think we're crazy if we talk about talking to Bill W. It was so funny. But, another part I remember about that trip is how specific his messages were to both of us, and how yours was exactly what you just relayed. And mine was really inspiring me to look at the 12 steps in a more expanded way and take it into, the 12 steps of inner child work, which is stage 2, and the 12 steps of reestablishing a relationship between your higher self and your human self. And then the last one, which is the multidimensional piece. And that's what I've developed, is that whole 4-stage, 12-step process to spiritual recovery.
Yep.
So again, it's time for another break. And this is Cathryn Taylor, your host from EFT for Spiritual Fitness, broadcasting live from BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. And stay tuned, because we're going to wrap up this show, and then I'll tell you what you're in store for the next one. So Nance, stay with us, and we'll wrap it up in the next segment.
Intergenerational programming is uniting America due to the tireless efforts of Dr. Ramona Frischman. Retired from the Miami-Dade County Public School System, Dr. Frischman continues to develop intergenerational learning programs aimed to improve the lives of children, young adults, and seniors through unique strategies and public policy in order to establish a mutually supportive agenda. She views intergenerational programs as a resource for policymakers and the general public on economic, social, and personal initiatives that govern our society. Her work bridges the generational gap, providing many individuals the opportunity to explore areas of common ground and celebrate each other's diversity. Contact Ramona Frischman at ramonalong@aol.com or visit www.gu.org to learn more about intergenerational programming.
Certified professional coach Pamela Reeves can help you with your relationships. Motivational and image coaching are just some of the ways she can help you enhance all aspects of your life. Her book, Is It Love or Merely a Sick Attachment?, helps readers clearly distinguish healthy, loving relationships from toxic ones. Ms. Reeves has put her words into action through Ray of Hope Kenya, an international initiative that provides outreach to victims of abusive relationships there with the goal of helping them rebuild their lives and the tools to avoid abuse. Ms. Reeves operates various business interests through her umbrella network, Nella LLC, and credits her success to her diverse work experience. Whatever your goals, whether striking a balance, reinventing your image, or simply lifting your lifestyle, Pamela Reeves will help you achieve them. Your life, your call. Dial 410-902-5715 or email Pamela at pamregon@verizon.net. She's also on the web at pamreeves.com and on Twitter at Pamela_Reeves.
All right, so welcome back to EFT for Spiritual Fitness. And today we've been talking about spiritual fitness and spiritual recovery. And we've been broadcasting live on BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. And I'm your host, Cathryn Taylor. And in this broadcast, I've had my very dear friend, Nancy Kaley, on board with me. And we've covered a variety of topics about addiction and recovery. And right before break, we started talking about our infamous trip from Chicago, where we were working with the Akashic Records, and we actually opened up the records, and we opened up the records of Bill W., the one of the founders of the 12 Steps, and invited him in. And over break, we were talking about what we both remembered so much about that journey was how relevant Bill's message was to both of us about the application of the universality of the 12 steps today. And so I think that was really, really the key point for us, Nancy, in terms of how we both took it into our own lives, was how relevant and vibrant that program is as a spiritual program, really coming back to ourselves and to our higher self and our higher power. You know,
yes.
Did you want to make any other comment about that trip?
No, I think just the relevance and the idea of how it solidified, like you said, our paths moving forward. You know, it just kind of sets your course and keeps you on task to say, there's a future self. There's just this constant evolution, which is so beautiful. And that's been our relationship, you and I, is over all these years of what we've been through. You know, you started it by talking about everything we've been through together and the different professionally and personally and spiritually and that evolution.
And that vitality.
With that spiritual foundation.
Well, I think one of the things that really came out of that conversation was in that next year, I had a blog talk radio show at the time that I always did a series on. And so in 2015, my series for that year was each month I took one of the 12 steps and I talked about what the step was, and then I talked about the 4 stages in reference to that stage or that step, and then I did a tapping sequence. It's like 90 minutes of broadcast, and I have just recently put all that together in a PDF file. And so if you're interested in that, the way you can get access to it is go to my website, which is www.EFTforyourinnerchild.com, and just go and sign up for the e-blasts. And one of the things that you get when you sign up for the e-blast is you get a series of emails that are spread a couple of days apart. And I think it's in the second day you will get that PDF file, and you'll have access to 12 months of 90-minute broadcasts that go through each of the steps with each of the 4 stages and tapping sequences to really assist you in that. So if you're into recovery, if you're wanting to explore that, that's a really nice tool to get access to. The other thing I want to invite you to do is I also have the introduction to the 4-stage 12-step material, and I'm still developing the other parts of it. But if you have a question about addiction or recovery or anything we've talked about today, I encourage you to email me with that question, and I'll answer it for you on the air. And in exchange for that, I'll send you the 37-page PDF intro so you can get a little bit more feel for that. My email address is Cathryn, Cathryn, at EFTforyourinnerchild.com. So back to this. So Nance, why don't we talk a little bit more about the specifics about COR, how people can get more information about it, what your programs are, so they leave with that fresh in their minds.
Okay, well, the COR Retreat, as you said, is located in Wayzata, Minnesota. It's COR, C-O-R, which is Latin for heart or soul. And the website is www.cormn.org. And you can access through there. You can email us for some information. You can also contact me on there at nancy@cormn.org. And also my phone number, I'll put that out, is 651-767-2702. But you can certainly start just at corminnesota.org in terms of the website. And then that trail can lead you to me, and you can take a look around on there and see what we have.
Okay. Well, and you have
we have an upcoming
program.
Retreat.
Right. Yes.
Yep. We have a program called Encore as well. We have upcoming retreats. The dates, there's still openings, a few openings left for the November retreat, which starts on November 7th, Wednesday, November 7th, and December, which starts on December 12th and goes through Sunday. So they're Wednesday to Sunday retreats here in Wayzata, Minnesota, and it is not too late to get to get free of that obsession with food going into the holidays. This is a very difficult time of the year for people who struggle with food addiction and sugar addiction and food obsession. So my journey started in November, shortly before Thanksgiving, and I experienced an amazing holiday season that year without the obsession with food. So it's not too late to start a new path even before the holidays.
Mm-hmm. And what I want to say about COR is the setting is just beautiful, and it's a way to completely get away from your day-to-day life. It's a residential. You stay with the other, anywhere from 10 to 16 people. It's sometimes it's men and women, sometimes it's just women, but it's just a retreat. I mean, like what it's called. It's a very beautiful retreat, yep. And it's very easily accessible, and you get a lot of support for moving forward. So, well, we only have a few minutes left, but I think what I'd like to do is just finish with a real short little EFT tapping sequence. And for people out there that have not done EFT, then just listen to this. I don't have time to kind of go into the explanation of it. For those of you who are familiar with it, we'll start with the setup, and I'm just going to kind of normalize everything we talked about and deal with any possible responses that you've had. So, Nance, would you be my echo for the tapping and just repeat what I say? All right. Mm-hmm. So we're starting on the karate, and we're setting up the setup. Okay. So even though I've heard a lot of information today, and it's riled some different feelings for me, I'm ready to really address my own stress addictions.
I am ready to address my own stress addictions.
And obviously, the I that I'm using is for all of those out there that have been listening, and you want a way to wrap this up for yourself. So even though I've heard a lot of new stuff today,
and
part of me really needed to hear this, whether I listened live or have found the archive, I trust that I heard this at the exact moment that I needed to hear it. And I'm ready to allow this information to sink in. Okay, so now we're just going to do a short round of neutralizing that. So come to your first point. All of this information. Some of it's overwhelming. But I don't have to take it in all at once. I can re-listen to this archive. It's there for support. And I can get information. And assistance. From any self-help program. Or anything that Cathryn or Nancy have both offered. So that I can begin my own journey of recovery. Where there's hope and peace. All right. So we've got to close out for today. Next week, you'll actually hear about those 4 stages of recovery. So I invite you to tune in and to listen to the broadcast of EFT for Spiritual Fitness. And until then, we've been broadcasting live on BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. And I'm your host, Cathryn Taylor, signing off for this week. Until next week, be good to you and to those you love.
You've been listening to the mother of inner child work and host of EFT for Spiritual Tapping, Cathryn Taylor. Join us each week and learn spiritual fitness and the art of relaxation for a more peaceful life. Allow joy, receive abundance, and attract healthy relationships on the next episode of Cathryn Taylor's EFT for Spiritual Fitness.
You've been listening to the BBM Global Network. The ideas, views, and opinions of this broadcast are those of the participants of the program and are not necessarily the ideas, views, and opinions of the BBM Global Network Company.